And what we have to do is get through the, we talk about surviving in the Arctic, and this is not quite the Arctic, but it's kind of close. But the point is we can't just survive. We've got to be able to thrive and operate. And so the more we can practice this environment, the better we're going to be if we get called to do that. So hopefully we learn all the hard lessons here, or most of them. We share them with everybody so that when they get into this environment, or if they get called into this environment, they're hopefully at a more of a jog and not at a walk.
Well, General Hokanson, thanks so much for sitting down with us. I wanted to ask, first of all, about what you saw today, what looked good, what some of the feedback was that you got, and also what some of the recommendations you bring up to the Joint Staff about what you saw today.
What we saw today is our guardsmen realizing that, the Arctic is an important environment, and we need to take every opportunity to really train environments we may not be exposed to all the time, just to remember we can operate in that, and then also to reacquaint ourselves with things that we have learned in the past, or in some cases we have to relearn. So if you look at the M777 artillery that they had today, I was talking to the crews about what they've learned in that environment, the cold, and frankly how our soldiers operate. And this is the 4th year for that unit. They continue to get better at what they're doing. And he said if the temperature is much colder, they found other things. And this year it was certainly cold, but not as cold as it had been previously.
What does the next step look like from something like this to a larger exercise farther north, or with a bigger unit, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so if you go back 3 years ago when I was the director of the Army Guard, we realigned the Guard divisions. Previously, our division headquarters and brigades were separate organizations. So we aligned them for training, really for large-scale combat operations. And the unit we saw today was a great example. They first came with a company. Next year, they came with a company and a detachment. The second year, they came with 2 companies. This year, they came with the entire battalion. And so what we're trying to do is build beyond platoon and company level readiness to where we build eventually, years from now, to where we are doing division level exercises. When I was a brigade commander, I spent a lot of time with our artillery veteran because it was so much fun. Great organization, they love to shoot, and get to do some awesome stuff.
And is a camp like that work? Does a National Guard training center like that work for that, or is that something you would go to one of the joint national training centers? So
we look at Camp Grayling. It is in a huge training area. In fact, that is an area where you could actually operate a division at. Some of our training are just not that large. But then again, we have to build in those local training areas the individual, the crew, the platoon, and the company level readiness to get to where you saw the team today. You always see a map of the United States and we're in the center and it kind of has a globe around it. If you look at a map from the North Pole, you see how close all these countries are, and you also see the vastness of the Arctic. And as we look at the temperatures increasing and further access to the Arctic, some of these areas that we almost thought, well, nobody would operate in there because they're so difficult. Now we're starting to see countries move into those areas, and there will be competition there. And you see China, you see Russia, and then you see some of our NATO allies like Norway that operate there. And we've got to be able to go wherever that potential fight may be. Or if we need to provide presence there, we need to be able to go there, and not just go there and survive, but go there, operate, and thrive.
So yeah, there's a lot of good training here. We integrate with the air.
Right.
So it really helps our fires. We get multiple.
On the joint side.
You also talked to and learned a little bit about the Latvians who are at Camp Grayling right now. What is the future of that partnership look like? And what does it look like with other Baltic countries or European countries, Eastern European countries?
So I was fortunate last year in June, I actually visited all the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And obviously, there's an immediate presence there because they border Russia, both Estonia, Latvia, and then Lithuania through Kaliningrad. And so they live this day to day. They've lived this for generations. And in many cases, the threat is more present to them. and you see the urgency and their support for Ukraine, but then also the focus on, hey, we need to be prepared if something happens along our border. And it's, in a way, a sense of urgency. And then also for us, we've gone back since the war in Ukraine started and met with our Baltic state partners and said, look, based on the current environment, would you like to change your training plans? And we've made some adaptations in that case.